Hello and welcome back to the Historian's Hut. Today we're going to talk about the longest and largest battle of World War I, the Battle of Verdun. Just to get a sense of where it is, here is the city of Verdun, highlighted in yellow. The most important landmark of the battle was the River Meuse, which I'll spell on the screen, but also highlight it here in blue. This thick black line you see going up across the map and coming down above the dotted line, that was the original front line between the German side and the French side. Up at the top here is the Central Powers side, controlled mainly by the Germans. I'll get rid of that. And down here at the bottom is the Allied side, controlled by the French. I'll get rid of that as well. So this battle began on February 21st, 1916, and it was masterminded by a German general named Erich von Falkenhayn. So he decided that by attacking Verdun and destroying the city and taking out this French stronghold, that he would be able to push France out of the war and also dishearten the British and make them surrender, make them withdraw from the war as well. So he decided to launch a major attack on Verdun. Again, down here, highlighted in yellow. And it started off with quite an introduction. It had a 12-hour bombardment, again on February 21st, 1916, 12-hour bombardment of around 1.2 million shells. These shells were fired by around 1,400 guns. They were firing all these thousands of shells all across Verdun, 100,000 per hour. For the sake of this battle, let's make the Germans a red color, up here, as you can see. And maybe let's have the French be some sort of darker blue. Like this, for instance. So, on February 21st, 1916, the Germans launched an attack from the east side of the Meuse River, which again is this river in blue. And they got about 3 miles in 2 days after that attack. So not too spectacular, but for World War I, that's a fairly decent charge. But it was very slow, the whole war in general. But, again, they got stopped after that 2-day period, and it gridlocked. But there is one very important place down here, a French position that was overtaken by the Germans. I'll pronounce it once here. It's I believe pronounced Fort Douaumont, but I'm from the United States, so I'll just call it Fort Douaumont, or maybe for all of our sakes, I'll just call it Fort D. Here's a picture of Fort Douaumont, or Fort D. It was an impressive structure. It was probably the best, the most significant, the most important of the French defenses in the Verdun region. It was around 1,200 feet tall, around 366 meters. It had 2 layers of meter-thick concrete walls around it, and its roof was around 6 meters thick, though I'm not really sure exactly what the material was made out of. It might have had some more armoring on it, but it was probably just a concrete roof. It also had a moat, and usually could have 30 feet of barbed wire. So this was quite an impressive structure. In its day, Fort Douaumont was a top-notch fortress. It had its own wiring for sending out messages or possibly telephone. It had latrines and dormitories and kitchens, and it had all the works. It was also designed to house around 635 soldiers at a time, comfortably, though it could also be crammed with a lot more. There would just be less space, and they'd be unhappy. Nevertheless, by the time of the Battle of Verdun, Fort Douaumont was very neglected by the French. It had only around 57 soldiers guarding it. Only 57 soldiers manning this fort that was supposed to be garrisoned by around 635. In addition to that, a lot of the guns were taken out of it. It was stripped of a lot of its artillery and its defenses. So by the time of the Battle of Verdun, these few soldiers who were left in this fortress had too few men to actually defend it, and they had too little armaments and weaponry to push back any attack. Because of all this neglect by the French, the German 24th Brandenburg Infantry Regiment, a small regiment of its own, these German soldiers were able to sneak into Fort Douaumont, and they were able to capture the 57 Frenchmen without firing a single shot, without causing any bloodshed. It was pretty much a miracle. The toughest fort in the French defense system in Verdun fell without a single shot being fired. So, before the month was even done, the Germans had captured all this territory. It was pretty extensive. And in this territory that they captured was these forts. Because things were looking pretty dire, the French brought in a new general to take control of the Verdun region and put an adequate defense in place to push back the Germans, or at least to resist the German advance and keep it contained. It's a very French name, but I'll try to pronounce it right. I'll put it on the screen, so judge me on my pronunciation if you will, but remember I'm from the United States, and we are not very well known for being great linguists. But they brought in Henri Philippe Pétain. Even though later on in World War II, this guy would become the leader of Vichy France, and his name would become besmirched and smeared, tainted, and disgraced, basically. During World War I, he was a war hero. So he was put in places of the defense of Verdun, and was actually able to keep the front line fairly stationary and stop the German advance for the time being. The way he did this is he ensured that everything was garrisoned properly. He made sure that the infrastructure between the defenses were adequate and that people and supplies could move freely and easily. And he also made the French defense a little bit more adaptable, where they would put some lines in front of their actual front line so they could fall back if they needed to. And so they could adjust to the enemy advance and keep it contained while not being rigid, not break as easily. So that's how he was able to keep control of the Verdun region. But France at this point was a long way from actually being able to gain their ground back. By the end of February, Henri Philippe Pétain was able to stop the advance, and the German attack was halting. So the Germans decided to shake their attack up a bit. Earlier, the Germans had been attacking from the east. Now, the Germans decide to attack from the west. There you go. A little arrow. But again, it was a very limited success. They only gained around 2 miles. But instead of just a few days, this time it was 2 miles in a month. Basically, they started this attack from the west at the end of February, and by the end of March, the next month, they'd only gained 2 miles. So that's how slow this advance was. With the attack from the west not working, the Germans decided to attack from both sides. So they continued their attack from the west, and they also restarted their attack from the east, which I'll show with an arrow here. But the French line was holding, and the advance was not really gaining ground, so the Germans decided to focus all of their attention on the east again, which I'll just, there you go. It's a very large attack on the east. There you go. Enjoy. So after the August attack from the east also failed, the Germans decided they needed a little bit of a shake-up in their military as well. So they got rid of General Erich von Falkenhayn, and they brought in General Paul von Hindenburg. Hindenburg, however, was not very enthusiastic about the assault on Verdun. So one of the first things that he did when he took power there was to halt the assault. He stopped pressuring for the Germans to move forward against Verdun. So a lot of the pressure disappeared, and a bit of a stalemate took place again, and there was a little bit of a weak point, which the French immediately noticed and launched into a counterattack. So after Hindenburg arrived and halted the German advance, the French counterattacked, and were able to push the Germans almost all the way back to where the battle began. The French were able to take back Fort Douaumont by October 24th, 1916. And they had pushed the Germans back far enough that by December of 1916, the battle was over. So, by the time the battle ended in December, it had basically been a year-long battle. It was the longest of the war, it was the largest of the war. Take a look at these casualties. There were around 700,000 casualties in the war, with over 300,000 of them being French. So the rest of those are German. And there were nearly, or possibly over, 200,000 deaths, at least on the French side. For some more detailed statistics on France, they claimed around 162,308 dead from the Battle of Verdun, and around 377,231 casualties. So, if you combine theirs with the Germans, it's a whole lot of dead people. And again, it was about 700,000 casualties, which is dead, wounded, and missing. So, there's a lot. And with that, in the December of 1916, the Battle of Verdun was over. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next time we draw history.